These seizures are a huge victory in our fight against crime.
Welcome to this latest edition of the Real Deal podcast as I continue to look back at season 3 of the epic show Snowfall. We are up to episode 5, The Bottoms. Of course, this is episode overall 931 of the Real Deal podcast. Quick recap before we get into the themes. Andre loses his badge and gun, for that matter. Teddy has a new problem, and Leon meets Scully. Themes forced to pivot. This was an episode where our primary characters, Franklin, Andre, who is a primary this season, and even Teddy, were forced to go outside their comfort zones. They're forced to make moves on the fly without warning. And we see them, especially in regards to Teddy and Franklin. We'll get into that over the course of the podcast and with best scenes, and certainly with the deep dive. Andre learning on the fly. So Andre, it's been a rough season for Andre. Now he's coming off a situation where he was able to take down Franklin's or hit Franklin somewhat with the raids from the previous episode. But during this celebration, and we're going to look at the interrogation as well as the scene, as well as the final scene of the episode. But during the celebration, while he's celebrating, a plan has already been in motion that he didn't see coming. And again, we go back to the last episode, the title of the last episode, The Game That Moves As You Play. These characters are forced to move again on the fly. Unfortunately for Andre, he's not able to see this and gets himself in a position where he gets his, you have Louis' sister comes in from out of town from Louisiana, kind of plays him, in a bar, drugs him, and Franklin and the company end up with his badge and gun. Then you see Andre in the interrogation being treated like a perp. Like, this is a guy who was a part of a major drug bust where, the guns and drugs were taken off the street. He, was called a television star by some of his fellow cops. And that doesn't matter because ultimately he's still a black cop in a corrupt system, in a world filled with majority white cops. And they look at him. You look at that scene when he's being interrogated. They ask him, was the woman a prostitute? He has spotty representation where he basically has to, give his representation a pep talk to say, help me out here. And then they bring up some of his past mistakes as far as the Louis situation, as far as him being sued for property damage. That, if you remember, in the last episode, Franklin had the guy taking pictures of that. That's what that was all about. So all of Andre's mistakes, or a lot of his mistakes, were exposed during that interrogation. And the bottom line is, again, despite that he thinks that he's fighting the good fight as far as against taking drugs off the street, he finds him, in this particular scene, and during this episode, he realizes that doing things by the book, doing things, straight on the straight and narrow, is just not going to work against Franklin. And he's forced to learn on the fly. Unfortunately for Andre, he's already a few steps behind. He's in the game. He's in playing at this point in the season. We're in episode 5. We're halfway. Once we complete this episode, we would be halfway through the season. He's playing come from behind, catch up to a game that Franklin has really never stopped playing or never paused to play. And and look at some of our characters. And we'll get to our other characters, but looking at Andre, Andre finally learns, and you see this at the end of he does two things during this episode that kind of signify that he's on to the game now, that he's a part of the game. One tells Melanie, look, pack your stuff. We're getting you out of here. We're gonna move up. She's supposed to be going around the Spelman at the end of the summer. He moves that up, says you're going to stay with your aunt 2 weeks before the dorm opens. Then he goes at the end of the episode, he recruits Nix to do a job in regards to finding out where Franklin Saint lays his head. We know he knows that he's no longer staying with Louis or his mom or Jerome. So Andre's learning, but as in the case of a boxing match, when one boxer waits too long to kind of like settle into the match, and he's already down 3 or 4 rounds before he knows it, and ends up probably losing, which could probably cost him the match in a decision. Andre's playing catch up, and he's playing catch up to an opponent again that has never stopped fighting and never stopped playing the game in terms of Franklin Saint. So he has his hands full, not only during this episode, of course, during this season. And again, we will see in coming episodes, Andre's thinking of how Andre's thinking outside the box, what those results will be. So that is the deep dive for this particular episode. That scenes Franklin Sissy and Arnold Tulowitz. Of course, Arnold he's a slumlord, Sissy's former employer, excuse me. I love this scene because similar, there are a couple scenes in this episode where the person in Teddy, we'll go through the Teddy scene. We go through obviously Andre earlier we can go even Andre, at the beginning was the game where the game was already over. Like the game was already over before it started. And in this scene, it comes off as if, Arnold, as if Tulowitz was on to Sissy and Franklin. Tulowitz was done before he even knew it hit him. So Franklin and Sissy, say that they basically, it basically is revealed that they were the ones that Tulowitz bought them out as far as the property. He outbid him for a piece of property that they wanted. He finds out that it was them that made him pay $40,000 over more than what he wanted to play, what he wanted to pay. They get a reaction out of him when Sissy says, calls him like, yeah, you're a man to people, saying that sarcastically, and basically calling him out for some of his slumlord practices. He gets emotional, says basically, get the fuck out of my office. I'm not going to be muscled by you. And they walk out smiling because that is the reaction that Sissy expected. He completely went for the bait, didn't see what was coming. He sends some goons over to, I guess he was going to try to intimidate Sissy. And that completely backfires. They get beat to a pulp, and they get beat, and they end up, Franklin again saw that coming, and they get beat up, and then end up being laid in his office, which is destroyed. So this is one of these things again where Franklin, again, you got to go back to that title, playing a game that continuously moves, playing the game, playing chess, with where he's at mentally right now, thinking moves ahead. And again, the slumlord did not see this coming whatsoever. And if you notice, and I noticed this with another rewatch of this episode, of this series, of this season, Sissy is learning that game as well. So whether or not she realizes it, she is being lured and seduced into that game by Franklin because of her aspirations with the real estate. And we will see certainly how that plays out. Not so much this season, but you can look at my season 4 and 4 through 6, especially 4 and 5, where that really reared its head as far as how the turn of her character and a loss of that innocence from that standpoint. So great scene. Um, Great scene all around. And the slumlord really did not know what was coming, and he ends up selling the property. He ends up giving up the property and getting strong, basically strong on by intimidated by Franklin and Sissy. Man, boy, fatback, Leon Scully. So we get introduced to one of the more colorful and just wild characters in the history of this show, Scully. Um, so Franklin wants to be connected all over LA. Scully is the guy in Inglewood that if he wants to run any drugs through, make any money off in that area, that he has to go through. Scully is, of course, connected to Man Boy. He's had a baby. He's had a baby, not had a baby, but he has a daughter with Man Boy's sister. So Man Boy makes the intro with Fatback and Leon, and basically tells Leon, look, you need to chill out with the pit bull. That pit bull shit is not going to work here. This dude is crazy. Leon's like, whatever. And they walk into this apartment, and just, I really should. This now making me think I should change the MVP, because Scully completely owns this scene. Leon is not terrified, but it was the first time. It was one of the few times in this whole entire series that you will see Leon's character shook by the presence of another person. Like Leon is you guys been in jail. He's fearless. We know Leon in his own way is a little crazy. Scully is completely just off. Like this guy, and it's so well played by DeAndre Bonds, who's been around for a while. It's so he plays it because it's so controlled. His energy, the charisma, just the insanity, all of it is controlled. And he has a guy in the bathroom, like he's playing loud music, and he has a guy half naked tied up in the bathroom. Asked him where, can they hear it? Can you hear that? And Man Boy's like, look, man, I don't hear nothing with this loud music. He turns up the music basically off, and he's still the only one that can hear it. And in essence, he didn't hear anything. He just wanted to go in there and beat the shit out the guy. Ultimately, the whole point of the scene was for them, again, to make the deal with Scully. They said they can get keys at basically 15 a key. He says he's getting it from the Mexicans for 9, but they, of course, that product is stepped on versus Franklin's product being 100% pure. So they have that connect. They walk out knowing just how wild that this guy is and how just off that Scully is. The complete opposite of the in control kind of Franklin-like clone that Man Boy is. Great introduction for Scully, because over the course of the series, especially in seasons 4 and 5, you really see Scully just show his ass. His whole ass from that standpoint in terms of how wild and just unpredictable this character is. Another, speaking of unpredictable, Rigo and Teddy. So Teddy gets a call from Gustavo saying the drops, saying his peoples have not received the drops. That's because Rigo has not made the drops. Rigo apparently wants a club with Teddy. Teddy was not aware of this. So Rigo, who again, not as off as Scully, but not that far from it, Teddy is forced to do something to do something that he didn't account for, and that's to have to basically get a nightclub in Los Angeles in order to continue the drops. And the guy, Rigo basically forces Teddy to do cocaine, almost similar to what the Colombians were doing with his brother in season 2. So again, Teddy is desperate. Teddy's going to do anything to keep the money going, so he can, with this fund this mission in Nicaragua with the Contras and that whole situation. So he does whatever. In terms of does the line of cocaine, goes back to his wife Julia and lets her know what's going on, and she's going to be needing her help in terms of knowing about the club scene in Los Angeles. Again, Teddy, this is something that Teddy did not anticipate. He's dealing with again, one of the few times that you would not see Teddy in control where he needs this guy in order for to make the drops, and he has to basically acquiesce to this guy's demands, or there will be no drops of the cocaine. Franklin Jerome. So Jerome is still hurting physically and somewhat possibly and basically psychologically from the beating they took from the cops in the previous episode. He's reflected. He basically tells Franklin, "Look, I don't want to be no old dude dealing drugs, no old head on the corner dealing drugs. I got this club, this music thing, Jam and Jerome's is something that I want to put all my energy into. Louis has her club. You see Franklin and his mom with the real estate. So Jerome has his own thoughts of a exit plan in regards to this, getting out the game. And Franklin is understanding. Franklin says, "Hey, this is why I'm trying to deal with only high end customers. This is why I'm trying to make it. This is why I'm trying to expand." Franklin in this scene is actually pushing the opposite of what Jerome wants. If you really listen to what he's saying, Franklin's talking about expansion, and Franklin in this scene was real slick about the language he used. Because on one hand, he's saying, "Yeah, we want to get off the corners." On one hand, he's saying, "Yeah, we want to get off the corners, but we don't want to get out the drug game." Jerome is talking about music. He's talking about dealing with his music. He's not even talking about the drug game. Like he didn't say I want completely out the drug game, but he's talking about just being a businessman and dealing with the music. Franklin's talking about expanding all over the country. So yes, Franklin was somewhat empathetic to what Jerome was saying, but at the same time, really going in the complete opposite when you really listen to what he was saying during this scene. And of course, reminds Jerome. Jerome says, "I remember when you was just selling dime bags, at the beginning." And Franklin says, "Well, you gave me those dime bags," laughingly. Laughing, jokingly is one of those jokes, but non-jokes. Like, yeah, dude, you put me on to this, and this is where we're at. So that's something certainly that will play out over the course of the entire series when you really think about it. So those were the best scenes. Also, there was a quick scene that I could have put in here between Franklin and Andre. They're both leaving their respective houses, and Franklin gives Andre a glance. Franklin's leaving. Andre might have been coming in. Franklin might have been leaving. Whatever the case was, they saw each other. And Franklin didn't even have to acknowledge Andre. He could just went in his car and went about his business, but he purposely turned and made sure Andre saw him and gave him a slight smile, basically tipping him off to, "Yeah, I did what happened to you. There was, I was responsible for that." That's what that smile was about. So that could have been on there as well. Yeah, I don't want to take back an MVP, man, because Scully, I'll give it to Sheila. It easily could have been Scully for that scene. That was such a great scene with Scully and DeAndre Bonds and his whole introduction. They're basically having cold-blooded killers shook amongst with his presence. But I'll give it to Sheila as the MVP, Louis' sister. She comes in, makes probably a couple $1,000s for a night's work, and goes home scot-free. And like I said, she had Andre played. Like Andre had no clue what hit him from that standpoint. And even though it's great casting because her and Louis look just alike. I mean, they look like they seemingly look like they could be sisters in real life. So, but I'm not going to knock Jerome for not seeing that. For not seeing that coming. That's not unusual for people to hook up in a bar. In a bar over some drinks or what have you. But again, we saw a couple scenes where people got hit, not seeing things, where it was Andre Tolowitz or even or Teddy not seeing what was coming from their counterparts in that particular scene. That's going to wrap it up for this latest edition of The Real Deal Podcast. We will be back with another episode of season 3 of the hit series Snowfall Season 3. We'll be back with episode 6. Enjoy your evening. So long.